Good morning. My name is Sonja Dümpelmann, and I'm Associate Professor of Landscape Architecture at the GSD. And I would like to welcome you all back after yesterday's keynote lectures, and I would like to welcome the new arrivals today. As you probably have noticed, we have a very intense program, and I believe our flight is already a little bit in delay. So for that reason, without further ado, and since you'll also be hearing me a little later on again, I would just like to jump into a very short introduction so that we can get focused for today. And I'm also going to quote one of the cultural geographers who was brought up yesterday in a number of presentations, Dennis Cosgrove. So in 1999, the late cultural geographer Dennis Cosgrove compared Heathrow Airport to the landscape of a Georgian estate. Cosgrove used this comparison not only to lay out some morphological parallels between the 18th century landscape garden and the 20th century jetport, the size, the open stretches of grass, for example, but also to point out their respective importance as economic engines for land development. Studying an airport could, as he said, recover landscape as a synthetic idea, a flexible concept. This landscape included social, political, and economic worlds, all of which we are going to touch upon today. I'm going to take Cosgrove's premise and briefly present to you a genealogy of airport landscape, pointing out also how reading the airport as landscape has contributed to important paradigm shifts in 20th century landscape design. As products of modernity, both aviation and the profession of landscape architecture have an early point of contact when the first manned flight, the first balloon flight, took off from the gardens of the Château de la Muette just outside of Paris. Whereas the early attempts at powered flight were undertaken in environments that provided suitable natural conditions, including wind and soft landing areas, such as the ones on the North Carolina coast, Wilbur and Orville Wright had to undertake complicated negotiations with pasturing cows on their first airfield, a pasture near Dayton, Ohio. So while the cows were driven into the southern end of the pasture to the south, the obstacle that remained was a thorn tree in the middle of the field that was sooner or later found to be an important point of orientation for first flying maneuvers along the oval flight path. So if you look at the map on the left, you see that I've marked this little thorn tree in red. The development of larger, heavier, and more powerful aircraft demanded that the early manufactured airfields would finally be equipped with concrete and asphalt runways. In the 1920s, simple airfields with nothing else than smoke pots to indicate wind directions, and some more or less haphazardly distributed hangars and sheds along the edges gave way to airports that were built more or less following comprehensive designs. The airport infrastructure became increasingly independent from the natural conditions, passing, as one commentator described, from pleasant pastoral scenes to a site where, and I'm quoting another commentator, men must bring to the site machines and materials to rectify the frugalities of nature and to scar the surface with broad, straight, deep-laid runways, felled trees, and other obstructions that might endanger the fast-moving vehicles of the air. Modern airports must be man-made. The only thing left to be determined by nature was the orientation, length, and strength of the main runway that was to be paralleling the prevailing wind, and also depended on the elevation above sea level that resulted in varying atmospheric density. The conception of the airport as a landscape began in the 1920s, when landscape architects realized the opportunity that airport design provided them. Aviation and the airport gave landscape designers new fields of experimentation. The aerial view brought a new type of landscape, a vertical landscape, or scenery, as one commentator put it. Some of the very few landscape designs in the US that experimented with modernist forms and expression were designed for early airports to be experienced primarily from the airplane from above. Other visionary airport designs were steeped in the Beaux-Arts tradition, suggesting the airport as the new gardens of Versailles. Later, with the beginning of the jet age, this idea was taken up by various designers in different forms, including in the false perspective created by water basins in the International Park for JFK Airport and in Daniel Urban Kiley's unrealized design for Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. This airport was prized in the early 1970s as the biggest existing airport. It covered 7,122 hectares, an area 8.5 times the size of the Gardens of Versailles, bigger than the island of Manhattan, and 20 times the size of Central Park. The artist Robert Smithson had compared the sizes of early plans for Dallas-Fort Worth Airport with the plan of Central Park, which is what you see here. He had developed his first earth art projects for the site, including the 1967 Wandering Earth Mounds and Gravel Paths, a couple of years before Daniel Kiley was consulted on the same project. In the 1980s, landscape architects like George Hargreaves recognized Smithson's art as inspirational for their work. They consequently focused their attention on designing landscapes for bodily movement through sculpted grounds. The vast expanse of the first jetports also contributed to another paradigm shift. Airport construction provided the ground for early environmental impact assessments and planning initiatives, as in the case of the 1968 jetport project in the Big Cypress Swamp of South Florida, and the project for Munich Airport beginning in the late 1960s. While these projects paralleled the general interest in environmental and regional landscape planning at the time, they also led to the recognition of the airport not only as a landscape, but also as distinctive environment, and even a novel ecosystem that was part of a larger landscape. Embedding airports into the larger landscape functionally and aesthetically, mitigating the environmental impact, has been a premise of projects like the one by West 8 for Amsterdam Airport Schiphol, which we will probably hear about very shortly when Adriaan Geuze delivers his first keynote today. The relocation and construction of new and larger airports further outside urban agglomerations and the US military's base realignment and closure program have in recent decades led to the closure of a number of airfields and airports. In particular, their conversion into public urban parks has provided cities and landscape architects with unforeseen opportunities and challenges. These sites have become grounds for provocative and playful visions and design experiments based upon new ecological theories stressing uncertainty and unpredictability. They provide space for social participation, nature conservation, and the evolution of natural processes. These designs emphasize the engagement with the ground and with the horizon. In many ways, airfields have come full circle. Once promoted by early 20th century park planners as part of urban park systems, as seen here in Toledo, Ohio, and as both a public recreational facility and airport, as seen here in this hybrid of golf course and airport in the small Alabama town of Enterprise, many former airports have by now indeed become parks. Then as now, in operation and closed, airports sit at the nexus between the local and the global, between nature, including humankind, and technology. As both motors and products of a global economy, they are also the locations where air passengers leave the airspace and are grounded. Designs for airport landscape have therefore always been particularly preoccupied with forging national, regional, and local identities and have been expressions of vernacular modernism. Besides creating places or non-places, airport landscape also creates spaces. Places and spaces that sort, segregate, and exclude, as well as connect. So with this, I hope we have enough ground to take off today. And for this purpose, I'm going to introduce our first keynote speaker for today, Adriaan Geuze, Adriaan founded West 8 Urban Design and Landscape Architecture in 1987. And recently he received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Mondrian Foundation in the Netherlands. He lectures worldwide and has, including, we're very happy, here today. And he's authored numerous books and essays, including Mosaics, West 8, and many of you know him. So please join me in welcoming Adriaan Geuze.
Yeah. Good morning. I was asked to keep half an hour. Is there somebody here who can flag 25 minutes? Yeah. Thank you for inviting me here. It is a real pleasure to more or less do some evaluation about Schiphol Airport, a project we work on for more than 20 years. And I at least never spoke about the last 12 years. So for me it also was an opportunity to rethink what we are doing or not doing. The project of Schiphol, and I would only focus on that today, can be easily presented in a morning lecture because it's only about images. There's no theory. So relax and flag me off in half an hour. And the reason there's no theory is that it was a strange moment in the history of landscape architecture in the late 80s, when a sort of, can you, the real issue, how can you anyhow landscape airports? And that was so obvious that we were, on day one we felt that we are impotent. We have nothing to deliver, nothing. There's no competition. For us, there's nothing to do. So it really forced us in thinking about a menu rather than design. Later on, that menu for me became very much an eye-opener, and maybe it could be theory, but I'm today not there yet. So, but with your help, it could be. Okay, this is a photograph of Schiphol Airport from the late 60s. It's in the National Archive. I don't know why it is so beautiful, but everyone likes this photograph, as I do, but I cannot explain why. There's a sort of potence in this image. So the ideal world of flying, and this is Porter Airlines, is Porter Airlines see the world as national parks, Canada, mountains, snow-topped mountains, blue ridges, lakes, ocean edge, and then you land in these beautiful landscapes. And I show this image because it is part also, I have to admit, of a sort of I wasn't aware of that very deep, irresponsible, romantic perception in my brains. Okay, I confess. And so even the animals are welcoming you. If you land in Toronto, which is one of the islands of Toronto Bay are so beautiful and green and hippie and pleasurable, and they sell this emotion very efficiently with marketing tools, and I drop for this instantly. There's even flowers. You don't carry luggage, it's not like that. You have a simple bag. Life is so easy. The plane is white, it's innocent. So I show this because somehow I think I would like to share a certain romantic ideal. So the reality is the opposite. We all know, especially, America is 20 years before the rest of the world. The reality is hell. So traveling is really painful, and after 9/11 it becomes extraordinarily painful. You spend, the wrong moments of your life, not with your family, in lousy places and with dirty smell in anonymous landscape which hate people, and you are dehumanized constantly. And specifically I'm aware specifically for elderly people, it's really aggressive. It's not even, it's not like okay, it's not okay. And we are born as Homo sapiens to navigate and to be in the wilderness, and only that talent makes us survive. So it's like, Cairo, you go from one point to the other. You don't talk about Cairo, well, and then take that boulevard and then take a left. You are completely, you step out of your door and then you think, okay, I will be happy if I arrive there and that's it. So there's no story in between. You understand what I mean? And this is the context we had to work in. So Schiphol Airport, as you see, Amsterdam at the north, Schiphol in the middle, became airport number 4 in Europe. As you know, Holland is a very small country, so it's a remarkable gift that we have a large airport and good connectivity to the world. So we could work as landscape architects in Holland, otherwise there was no chance. And they went from a sort of Toronto Porter Airline mentality in the agricultural landscape, surprisingly quick, into a large, huge airport with terminals and piers and business parks and parking lots and everything. And that climaxed in the late 80s, exactly on the moment that in Holland an environmental awareness about noise, airplanes crashing into suburban apartment neighborhoods, pollution. People in Amsterdam are Amsterdam people, so they think they are the center of the universe and everything is in peace and harmony and Canal District. So they had a principal disconnection with the mentality of Schiphol to growing, wow, to pollute, to damage and all these kind of things. So there was a political campaign against Schiphol, very serious, threatening on the level of the Prime Minister, because everyone knows if Schiphol fails to grow, other airports will grow and it will ruin the Dutch economy. So Schiphol directors were more and more chosen to PR that Schiphol is a feel-good, quality place, that they are responsible for environment, etc. And exactly that was the luck. On that moment, we had a chance to do an acquisition. And so Schiphol Airport was under construction. It was a vast, windy, terrible concrete tarmac, steel glass parking lot hell. People hated the place, you know, streetscapes like this. But this is not. This is, let's say, it's not that Schiphol was bad, but this is normal for airports. And as a customer, you know, imagine me and my family taking a plane to Spain for holidays. This is, you know, where there's, you know, only a few of us are able to deal with this. The rest of the world cannot deal with this. It is very complex. And it's a constant building site, constant, like in China, and everywhere open edges and dirt and like junk space. And why, you know, you cannot even grasp what you see. So complex, and it falls off every theory. So we had a chance for acquisition to introduce, and we heard that they also had money problems. To introduce an idea that we made an analysis, which was not more than 2-3 days of work, that the airport as a territory was about 200,000 hectares, but completely fragmented land, berms and road edges. If you pile up all these numbers, you get a gigantic surface, and it basically was untreated, and there were a lot of construction sites. And the construction site became part of, like an academic hospital, is always in flux. The building is never finished. They change it for every new machinery or new thing. And so we introduced a strategy menu which could be summarized on one affiche, one poster. That's it. And we introduced the idea that they could take away all the dirt, all the unnecessary tarmac, gravel, sidewalks, everything taken away, and just plant trees, cheaply bought, very young, to make a sort of veil, which has nothing to do with the design, which is more related to the infrastructural complexity, and which could work efficiently. And therefore to step off the concept of that there's a landscape architect, and there are weekly meetings with the traffic authority and the green department and the commercial people and the utility people. They had weekly meetings to negotiate the ideal streetscape, etc. So we said, give it up. We lost. Just the moment you clean up a site, bombardment of trees and go away. And we made a calculation with the engineer office that this could, so they could double the territory the square feet, and get approximately half. They needed half the budget, and no ever meeting anymore. So there's no design meeting or planning meeting. So we also and they immediately took that on board. It's very Dutch, because they thought, well, that's great, because then we can get rid of 4 or 5 departments and maybe 20 people, and they were really impressed by that. It was a very crazy coincidence. We were not after that, but that was the outcome of this. You know, landscape architecture was also bureaucratized of public space, and their business is, you know, running an airport. They are not interesting in these sort of internal bureaucracies. So it helped. So we had to, that was a very critical step, take off all the existing green structure, and they did, which is completely shameless, but it happened. And later on we had to start a debate, and we did a little bit of sketches. So this is all the work, eh? There's no other work. This is it. In which we buy trees for, let's say, 10 for $1. We plant them about 3 feet spacing, and select naturally over the years. And we could, it was very important, so we did do one step of scientific approach. Schiphol Airport as a territoire had at least 7, 8, 9, 10 different soils, because it's always synthesized soil next to infrastructure. It's a leftover dump, or it is an old natural soil. The water tables are everywhere different. They really told us, if you do landscaping, no birds. So we want a certificate tested by scientists that everything you plant attract no birds, which is like, what is this? And the outcome of that, and they also said, because we made the propaganda, plant trees by millions. If your utility people have a problem, take them away and replant later, because it's so cheap. Don't have a meeting, just do it. As long as you tell it need to be clean, and you only need one person in a yellow jacket to drive around the airport and to double check that everyone is doing it. And maybe that is only needed in the season, the planting season. So that was the strategy. And we could start an attack of birch trees, because the Betula pubescens came out as the birch, the ideal tree where never ever a bird was spotted in literature. And seriously, it's true, there's no bird in this tree, never. And I still don't know why, but birds, this is a bird from Finland, and birds, they have a problem. They don't get. So we introduced also the idea that we need massive seeding of clover to do a natural soil mitigation, to bring nutrients into the bad soils of the side road edges, and had beehives to make a sort of statement on ecology on the level of insects and flowers. You understand? So the grotesque Schiphol exploding and flying 5 million planes instead of 3 million planes, they could also play the card, we are busy with ecology, even on the smaller scale. And they did it. The early years, the clover was like colonizing all of the territories under the birch trees, and did a very good job in helping to improve soils. And you see, in 2-3 years, the results were remarkable. We cut the edges of the road. There was always a soft, clean edge, and then a wild, natural in between. You see, these were the results. And whenever something was rebuilt, which is every year, every day, in winter season, bang, we plant a tree, 3-year-old trees all over the place. And this could work everywhere, basically. So this is a good example. Normally in an urban situation, this is negotiated for at least 5-6 meetings. So this existing tree is reported. It's somewhere in a drawing, in a document. It's utility drawings. And you know what? They need an extra cable. On Schiphol Airport, the cable is number one, always. Utility, number one. We are infrastructure, the cable is number one. So, and we didn't take care at all, and we implemented a sort of let's go, anything is okay mentality, as long as you replant every winter. And this is, for us, was a fundamentally a paradigm shift. So in the larger outside territories, this structure became extraordinarily beautiful as well, because the scale of fragmentation wasn't there, and the scale of the planting and the simplicity of it really works on aesthetic level. On other areas, we were more interested in to push back the static, the visual complexity, which you normally find on airports. In the terminal district, this is the only drawing we ever made. We had to implement water and take away utilities to be concentrated in one corridor. And this project was planted 3 times because they changed fundamentally the whole layout of traffic. And we are now in the 3rd life of this project. So the bird tree cannot keep up with infrastructure if they are cut every 5 years. If you cut them every 7 or 8 years, they are strong, they win. But they need sort of starting years to be visible, so you see the disbalance. So we cleaned every condition under the flyovers into a gravel with rocks, to just clean it, that's not visually attacking you. And every ½ inch of surface is grass, clover, and trees, fundamentally, and it never changed. So this is a strategy 20 years old. We were not paid more than 4 or 5 hours a year. So there's no project in my hands. It's nothing, empty. This was not business, it is. And the result became more and more interesting as long as the trees were, kept there. And we achieved in 6 years the 800,000 tree number, which is remarkable. So the quantity makes sense. Okay, the strategy both works in environments with office and central district, as you see here, but also in it's a business park, Microsoft headquarters. Very simple approach, and also works in the larger territories outside, in the periphery of the airport, where you see we make really miles of trees. That's where the big numbers of trees are. You see everywhere the green edges, to more or less take a sort of veil all over the airport, and this is what you see if you go there. Business parks, cargo districts. I think it's pretty cool. I'm very proud on these kind of images, which you can photograph every day. And so utilities order and infrastructure the design, and we backfill everything which is left. You see, it is bringing a harmony and identity, and of course you need to be a little bit aggressive where the public space and the airport, where it is. I think people are not interested in fences and all these kind of what happens inside. So we make a berm or some topography and birches more, let's say, more ambitious than anything goes. Traffic and parking was so dominant that we needed really a multi-approach to that. So with recycling soil, we could make small taluds to take the car. You can still see that there is large parking, but they are not in your face. And in combination with the trees, somewhere hedges. Then for new parkings, we introduced the idea that the parking always goes together because they are totally utilitarian parking. There's never, this is off-the-shelf parking garages, concrete. So that they always go together with birches, and they have patios. So from the parking you also see seasons, and in the patios they bring daylight, birches again. We have only one repertoire, is birches. Okay, to escape this kind of simplicity, we also attacked airside with tulips and bulbs. And this worked for 3-4 years and then became a failure because in winter they spray the airplane with a sort of nutrient-rich substrate. I don't know what it is. It drains into these pedals, and then the bulbs don't survive. But we had the pleasure, at least 2 years, of this kind of amazing welcome in Holland. And in the landside territory, we made a show with over 3-4 million bulbs planted with machines all over the space. What a welcome. So in the central district, we needed more strategy. As you see, the airport changed. This is the entrance in the mid-80s. Departure, arrival, and there's a gigantic station with a roof where we introduced a grass sedum roof to neutralize, if you are on departure level, a roof landscape visible with aircos and skylights and everything. It was very successful. It was our first green roof, no design. And the place, we introduced the idea that every front door at Schiphol Airport, including the terminal, should have flowers on the Dutch level of quality of flower. Commercial signs we could attack and could position on one side of the airport main plaza, to make a sort of screen of hundreds of billboards, to make a space where people could escape the terminal, relax and sit on the edge of flowers. You literally sit in the flowers. You can touch the flowers, you can put your cigarette into the... And these flowers are... Schiphol was ready to pay €1,000 a year per flower pot. That is, and we could have 5-6 different species change a year. So this is like flowers on the level of paradise. Now the interesting thing is that it is shamelessly playing with identity, of course. What is Holland? But people love it. So they hate the terminal. They are so happy to relieve themselves and to be in, to hang around, to have social talks, and it is very attractive to have this ambience with tulips. And you can photograph these photos every day. We have thousands of these. So lilies, the orange lilies on a quality of a color you can hardly grasp. Instead of bollards, anti-terrorist bollards, there is flowers, and there is always flowers, always, always, always. So as a sort of infrastructural engineering of landscape, no concept, with a sort of spend all the dollars in flower pots and be really professional and good. It took us 3 seasons to optimize, because there's no stuff at Schiphol with contractors, the recycling of these flowers over the seasons, because they are in warehouse. If there is a very high temperature, they call to the supplier, say, well, you have to beef up your next delivery, because the ladies are dying, and in 1.5 weeks we need your sunflowers. So that had to be negotiated with the season. In winter, there's at this moment flowers like these and bulbs. In the last 12 years, I had no contract at all at Schiphol Airport, so it was self-containing. And the last thing we did was to introduce a large television screen. They wanted on the plaza, to position on the other side, where, for example, football championship is, they put an arena, and there's also kind of commercial abuse of the public space as a welcome for the traveler, which is very painful if you travel a lot, because you always have to fight yourself through this commercial shit. And this, because they don't pay nothing for this, they receive money, and then Coca-Cola or BMW, they put things. The planting strategy, with our attention, became extraordinarily successful. I am really standing in very large shoes. I'm so proud, and we did so good, and we are. Imagine that even territories which are not even an airport yet have been planted with large parcels of trees. You see them, which are anticipating in future dirt and complexity and visual aggression. and look like this. And it is a sort of self-propelling automatic pilot. The seasonality of the birch trees is wonderful. Look at this. This is photographs of 2 days ago. When there's snow, it is like amazing. And there's almost no brain. It's only a taste. It's a sort of texture. A year ago, we were asked because people thought, well, your strategy is not efficient. And I said, yeah, of course, we never evaluate, we never talk, you don't even ask us to come. So we had a chance to do sketches on photographs. So we photographed everything and told them how they can improve. So for example, so they sort of reset, to give back the memory, because nobody is involved in this. It's all executed via tenders. Even the brains are tendered, which you cannot do. So we make sketches like this, and they were welcoming this to improve. You see here, for example, by adding a few trees, you take away the visual aggression of the infrastructure. And then an engineer office they hired, not us, they translate this in new documents, which is against our idea. We should not have documents. They don't understand. So there's now new people on the airport. They start to document things again. There are some areas where a decision was made, because these are so permanent, they will not change every year, to work with permanent trees. So here you see, for example, a boulevard with London Plane. And then the interesting step came, like we really had a sort of feeling of pride 2 years ago, when we could introduce, both to the Airport Authority and the Amsterdam Municipal Authority, why is Amsterdamse Bos, which is a very successful park from the 30s, not be jumping over the canal, which is the Haarlemmermeerpolder, which is the reclamation where Schiphol is made in, land reclamation. And could people start to see Schiphol Airport, the green territories, as park? So we made a drawing, a sort of propaganda drawing, in which you see Amsterdam Zuidas, which is the financial district, Schiphol Airport at the left. Here, this is the central district, so the runways are here, is Amsterdamse Bos. And we said, if you just make bridges and make a more circular bicycle road, for people who live in these neighborhoods, there's no distinction between airport, golf course, green, landscaping, canals, and the Amsterdam forest. And this was very much an eye-opener. So suddenly, the Schiphol Airport green strategy, as a sort of critical mass of trees and green, with some even ecological potential, was seen as an extension of the Amsterdamse Bos. Of course, there's no money for the bridges today, but that will come definitely. Now, I end my lecture with explaining infrastructural design and no meetings, how dangerous that is. In the last 20 years, there was at least 2 or 3 commercial signs addition to the airport authorities a year. And there is a person at the airport who is making contracts to bidders to put a commercial sign, which is anything. And they make at least €500,000 per year on one of these signs. So it became a business. And the idea behind this sign is that you can see it. Now, what happened? A year ago, Monday morning, I drive to Amsterdam, and I am confronted with trees which are completely chopped off. And not a few, tens of thousands of trees were chopped off. So the guy who is responsible in the airport, the commercial department, to exploit these commercial signs, had made a commission for a contractor to free all his view corridors, which was exactly opposite of what we were busy with for 20 years to make it softer, because you cannot win from infrastructure, traffic signs, and all these kind of things. So we always speculated about this kind of effect, that there is, it is not so hard. You soften, or this, for example. It is very primitive, I commit, but it is efficient, it works. You cannot not see the traffic signs and the commercial signs, but they are not too much in your face. Now, and this was what I saw. Like Canadian clear cutting, like strip cutting my 800,000 trees. So the problem was I don't have a contract, so I didn't even know who I had to call. So from the highway, where the airport is really aggressive, in your face, complex, dominant, dirty, negative perception, this was the result. I thought I go to the television because this is a joke. We need to have a reporter here with camera and show you on Schiphol airport, we plant trees, and now you know what? We kill 150,000 trees, like that, which I've never seen that in my life. I thought, well, I better don't do that because it will not be good for our reputation, but we need to have the debate. So I introduced the idea. I told them it was a very clever strategy, as long as they don't take the trees out, so that they could enjoy their own devastation. And I have no theory about birch trees, but maybe they sprout again. But I thought it could also be that they cannot survive this. It's too radical. So here you see they are chopped off about eye level, but most were chopped off at knee level. And remarkably, some of it sprouted again. And you see now is a very strange situation where the forest has a sort of fat trunks, but a sort of an abrupt end of the trees. And of course, it looks crazy. I don't know. I have no idea. So this was what we had. So you drive over the highway. You see what is behind, but if you make a photograph, you don't see it. But in motion, you can see that. And there the moment there is, so here appears a commercial sign. The trees were chopped, and you see nothing. The trees are dead, or these are new planted trees. We started planting trees last winter after a phone call. But so here you see the stubs. And this is I think this is a perfect last slide to demonstrate that we are, just landscape architect, and we have a little or no influence. Thank you.
Okay, we have, so to speak, the $1 million question. I'm going to open up for one question to Adriaan. No pressure, no pressure.
Well, again, I appreciate.
Okay.
We will talk later.
We will talk later. And so it's my pleasure to introduce the new speaker, our next speaker, Margaret Jones, who is a fellow and chair of the Board of Trustees of the American Academy in Rome, a fellow of the American Society of Landscape Architects, a senior fellow of the Design Futures Council, and president of Hargreaves Associates. She has been in charge of numerous award-winning projects and served on numerous juries. And she's going to speak to us today about 2 decades of airport transformation. So please join me in welcoming Mary Margaret.
Thank you, Sonja. Thank you, Charles, for having me. Very happy to be here. So I will take you through, somebody's waving at me up there. Can you hear? I will take you through 2 decades of projects. It's hard to believe that we've been doing this for 2 decades, but I must have been a child when we started. So I'll start with Crissy Field. Many of you know this project, but it is one that was built. It took years of public process and agency review. and sort of the labyrinthine process of making our way through the National Park Service's cultural resources staff for historic preservation and restoration. So it's 100 acres, it's a mile long, it is at the base of the Golden Gate Bridge. It is part of a network of open spaces that ring the bay, that are the bay edge of San Francisco, but it's the largest of them, of course, at 100 acres. It was bay, as you see in the top photograph. It still flooded when it was first filled, as you see. It was filled for the expo in 1911 and then taken over by the Army, and it's where biplanes landed in the 1920s. The first airmail landed here. So it's a historic landmark. It's a grass airfield named after Admiral Crissy. So it is part of our national defense history, which means, of course, that we were working with natural resource staff of the National Park Service as well as cultural resource staff, neither of whom agree on their goals, both of whom would have been happy for nothing to happen rather than the wrong thing to happen. So imagine those sort of terms of engagement over a 5-year process. So this is what it looked like when we started. Historic barracks, non-historic barracks, acres and acres of asphalt, miles of fence, and 300 angry people at our first public meeting. And these were people who were already using Crissy Field just like that and thought it was just fine because it was a place they could run their dogs off leash. And we had people stand up and say they were urban, I can't remember, the zoologists or something, but what they really were dog owners. So the first thing we did was map the historic extent of the tidal marsh that had existed there. So, of course, that's the first thing you do with natural resource staff, the National Park Service, is you say, okay, we can't go back to that. Because that would include the Marina District, which has, $10 million homes in it. So we can't go back to what it was. So we have to go forward. Then we mapped in red the 2 periods of significance of the airfield. You all know about, for the National Park Service, it's all about the period of significance. And we tried to convince them that there was no single period of significance, that all these times were important, and overlaying all these times was the key to successfully moving forward. So we did these series of diagrams. We called this one yours, mine, and ours. And that's where we said, okay, everybody who wants the airfield, here's the airfield. Everybody who wants a restored tidal marsh, here's a restored tidal marsh. And for all you board sailors, turns out this was one of the top 5 windsurfing spots in the world, and it turns out most windsurfers are lawyers. Here you go. This is where you get to be. So they get to be here. So we said, okay, what a tragedy that would be. What a mistake that would be to balkanize these 100 acres. So we did these series of options, moving from less aggressive to more aggressive. No marsh, tidal marsh. We ended up fairly like this. But what an opportunity there could have been if you went more and more aggressively toward an extent of tidal marsh and an interface of airfield and tidal marsh and dune field, and a connection of the main parade ground of the Presidio Post. And undergrounding a road, wouldn't that be great? Or moving a road, partly tunneling a road, which is now finally happening. Unfortunately, I'm sad to say they're going to put a building here so that connection of the main parade ground to an enlarged marsh probably will not happen. It's too bad because the marsh needs to be that big to be sustainable, self-sustaining. Anyway, so we ended up with a plan like this. It negotiated through all that public process and all the desires of cultural and natural resource staff. We managed to trace every period of history of the airfield to some degree. One period here, and even the paved airstrip jutting into the marsh, which had no significance, even though it was the most recent use of the land in the National Park Service's minds. So tidal marsh and East Beach and West Beach, restored dune field, and a grove of cypress trees because every entrance to the historic Presidio is marked by a grove of cypress trees. And you see it as San Francisco's beloved front door. We moved, even though it looks like it was never in a way, always like this. It looks like it was always like this, never changed. We moved over 100,000 cubic yards of dirt. And it's a very modern landscape. It's about plains and juxtaposition of surfaces, and really the most sustainably built national park ever because we kept everything on site. So every piece of material that was demolished or moved stayed on site. And you see how the airfield became a kind of positive landform. So when you walk along the promenade, at this point the airfield's over your head, and by the time you get to the other end of the airfield, it's at your feet. So it's a very subtle play of planes. And we use that dirt to create both back dunes and a restored natural dune system at the water's edge. So it gives you prospect and refuge. It reveals views. As you enter, you don't see the water at first. And then you can use some of those places for prospect and see the water. And actually, this became a lifeguard stand for the windsurfers. During demolition, we discovered Native American midden ground. So we had to stop for months while all the tribal heads came together and decided what to do with the midden ground, which is trash, but could also be remains. So the decision was to treat it like this. And on the day it opened, Crissy Field became a place for a different kind of flight. And 1 million people a year come to Crissy Field, including the board sailors. We had a huge fight over these trees. The National Park Service natural resource staff wanted to remove the trees because they weren't native. But as you can see, they host and sponsor all kinds of activities like weddings and are a beautiful silhouette against the sky. And I'm happy to say that over 10 years later, the marsh is thriving. And this is the Native American midden ground preserved forever. Intact. One of the more interesting stories, I think, is what has happened to the historic hangars around Crissy Field. They put out RFPs for various uses, and you see Planet Granite, La Petite Baline, and House of Air. House of Air is amazing. It's a hangar full of trampolines. It is so fun. And there's also a bicycle center. So these have become revitalized, reused recreational destinations. So in the middle, I want to spend a really brief moment on 2 projects that you will see a lot more of because we were part of a competition but didn't win. So you'll hear from the winners. But I wanted to spend just a minute on Orange County Great Park because this was a case with a decommissioned airport, as you know, where we used the geometries of the airport to guide everything that we did. So the airstrips were the foundational basis of the moves we proposed on the site, which we felt would aid in phasing and aid in application of multiple scenarios going forward. So the airstrips formed the basis for the array of recreational uses and horticultural uses that were desired on the site, as well as connections to future and adjacent development, and then using the dendritic patterns to connect all of that to the adjacent development sites. And as you all know, that was one of the key goals of this project, was to foster adjacent developments. So we look at the ingredients we have: water, nature, activity, culture, and infrastructure, and look at how to array those across creating systems, creating sustainability, and making design, making place. So each of that matrix overlay of all those components led us to the ability to be able to combine them in infinite possible ways so that there would be great flexibility in realizing this plan going forward. Agriculture, very much a part of it, urban agriculture, using those airstrips. Tom Main from Morphosis worked with us in ways of taking big hangar-type buildings and making them a part of those airstrips, making environmental systems and art a part of those airstrips, and making recreation a part of those airstrips. So again, using the strips as very much the foundational elements of the plan. Opposite of that, in Tempelhof in Berlin, we let the traces of the two airstrips, of course, remain, but everything else is in contrast to that. Everything else is a matter of nature sort of taking over or being juxtaposed with that, and natural systems almost being allowed to do their own thing. I think about Christophe Girox's talk last night, and I think about in Orange County the idea of letting that place as it was read through, and I think about an opposite here of letting it be juxtaposed against. So the goal here, the program here, was biomass, energy generation, horticultural display, horticulture, agriculture, wetlands. So letting sort of the airstrips be juxtaposed amongst those various systems, and then letting those again inform the connections to adjacent development with more recreational focus here and the horticultural displays here and the urban beach adjacent to the giant sort of historic tarmac of the airport. So again, a sort of different idea of stitches against nature, and an ecological succession. So now I want to take you to current work. This is a project that many of you know. I would say half the people in this room have either given this project as a studio project or have taken this project as a studio project. So we were hired almost 2 years ago by the National Park Service and New York City Parks together to look at the 10,500 acres they jointly own around Jamaica Bay. And this came as a result of Mayor Bloomberg and Interior Secretary Salazar deciding it was time to erase the legacy of Robert Moses, who, when the Beltline or the Beltway was built, everything to this side of it in the lighter green became a city park, and everything to the right of it, the darker green, became a national park. Now, we all know that's crazy because these are connected ecologically, they're connected physically, the water connects, but they were divvied up jurisdictionally, with one exception to that being the Rockaways, which is City Park, and a couple of other city parks here. So, quite an intense and exciting charge. I can't show you our proposal because it's under wraps until the National Park Service finishes their general management plan process. So if anybody asks you, I did not show you our proposal, but I will show you some of the analysis and some of the challenges which I think are interesting. First of all, the landscape of Jamaica Bay looks like this. It's quite beautiful. It's some of the most beautiful beaches I've ever experienced, Fort Tilden Beach and Breezy Point Beach. Of course, we started pre-Sandy, so we have gone back and evaluated post-Sandy. It's been a pretty interesting process. But of course, it will be pointed out to you that these are invasive species, so they're beautiful, but they're bad. And then Jamaica Bay looks like this in terms of its historic resources. Reese Beach, beautiful from the Moses era, beautiful building. The armaments throughout Fort Tilden that are part of our national defense history are actually quite beautiful and quite dramatic. And then, of course, the runways themselves on Floyd Bennett Field, which is what I'll focus on. But those are historic, and even the depth of the concrete is historic. So once again, National Park Service, cultural resources, natural resources, having different goals, different issues. So this is what Jamaica Bay was once like: a series of wetlands, a buffer. It worked as a natural system. It was beautifully designed by nature. And this is what happened. Landfills surrounding Jamaica Bay to the extent you wouldn't believe, and notice these labels, illegal dumping. It was the time in New York's history when a lot of money was passing hands, and a lot of landfills were accepting just about anything. Of course, the biggest one being JFK, right there. So a lot of sanitary dumps, a lot of hazardous dumping happening even though it shouldn't. One thing to note, though, is the Corps of Engineers built a wall right here at Breezy Point, which collects sand, and that's what's allowed Breezy Point to become one of the most beautiful beaches, because the sand is coming from, Montauk, and it's moving all the way down and collecting at Breezy Point. Unfortunately, Breezy Point, of course, is the community that had such severe fires during Sandy. So I'm going to focus more on Floyd Bennett Field, which is an airfield, which was a civic airport. Of course, that's what the land was, and that's what it became. So it was total, like Crissy Field, it was totally filled. So who made it? This is who made it today. Everybody thinks a lot of what's out there is nature, but as you can see, very little of it is nature. But that's what it's about to become, very rapidly, within 10 years. All those wetlands will disappear. The other thing that's interesting about it is the population. Almost 1 million people live within a mile of Jamaica Bay, many of them children who've never seen the water, never camped overnight. Amazing diversity. And the National Park Service realizes that they need to change their audience. Their audience, their demographic is no longer the Caucasian family in the station wagon, 2 kids, 2 parents going to Yosemite. Their audience is urban youth and diverse urban youth, and they need to catch those. And it means a sort of early capture of a new audience to outdoor activities. Again, kids are camping on Floyd Bennett Field today who are afraid there will be bears there. They've never slept overnight. They've never been on the water. So this becomes, the gateway activities are the key to fostering a next generation of national park users, and the National Park Service realizes this. And to make environmental restoration part of a national and city park experience, so that it's part of the education, it's part of the environmental story, and it's part of the recreational story. To make all that part of our everyday lives. This, of course, is the work that the Corps of Engineers is doing on one of those wetlands, raising the level, using fill to raise the level of the wetland because the tides are rising so rapidly in Jamaica Bay. We're yet to see if it will work, but it actually survived Sandy quite well. One lesson learned, they said they would never work around existing vegetation like this, like they did. You can see the cells and the fences and the fill. They said that was crazy. We should just remove them and replace them next time. This is extremely expensive. So to imagine this across all the acres of wetlands in Jamaica Bay is a little bit daunting. So how about a different idea? And again, this is not our proposal, this is an analysis we did. If you look at Floyd Bennett Field and you look at this pattern of wetlands that it was originally, and apply that with the airfield as it exists today, it begins to give you hints of how you might transform this airfield into a place that helps solve the problems of Jamaica Bay, helps become a destination, helps become a natural resource, helps become a cultural artifact, and a place to learn from. So there's different kinds of strategies one could imagine, just sort of working with existing but transforming an edge. One could be more aggressive and recreate an edge, create more edge. So in each case, this sort of color is talking about bringing wetland in, bringing bay in, letting the runways become greenways, possibly, keeping them but stripping them. Perhaps this is a great place for a center of resiliency study. I'm not proposing that, but it would be a great place. And how about, a new marina? How about aviation history? But most of all, this is about how one might get more and more aggressive with removing but retaining the airstrips. And maybe we could even connect and have the water systems connect into Jamaica Bay through Floyd Bennett Field as they once would have. Thank you very much. Wait and see what happens.